Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're embarking on a journey back in time, to an era that reshaped our world in ways we still feel today. We're going to explore the story of the Second World War, a conflict of unprecedented scale and consequence. This isn't just a story of dates and battles. It's a story of people, of ideologies, and of the enduring human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. So, grab a seat, and let's dive into the complex and compelling history of World War II. To truly understand how the world plunged into its second global conflict in just over 2 decades, we have to go back to the end of the first. The year is 1919. The Great War is over, and the victorious powers have gathered in Paris to sign the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty, intended to bring lasting peace, instead planted the seeds of future conflict. It imposed heavy reparations and territorial losses on Germany, creating a deep sense of national humiliation and economic hardship. Across the country, resentment simmered. It was in this fertile ground of discontent that extremist ideologies began to take root. In Italy, Benito Mussolini and his fascist party rose to power, promising to restore national pride. In Japan, an expansionist military leadership dreamed of a vast empire across Asia. But it was in Germany where the most dangerous movement was brewing. A charismatic and deeply disturbed man named Adolf Hitler, leading the Nazi Party, capitalized on the public's anger. He promised to restore Germany's former glory, to reclaim lost lands, and he offered a scapegoat for all of Germany's problems: its Jewish population and other minorities. By 1933, Hitler was the Chancellor of Germany, and the world was on a collision course with disaster. Throughout the 1930s, the warning signs grew increasingly dire. Hitler began to openly defy the Treaty of Versailles, rearming Germany and reoccupying the Rhineland. The international community, still reeling from the last war and mired in the Great Depression, largely chose a policy of appeasement. They hoped that by giving Hitler some of what he wanted, they could avoid another catastrophic war. In 1938, this policy reached its peak with the Munich Agreement, where Britain and France allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned home, declaring peace for our time. It was a peace that would last less than a year. Appeasement only emboldened Hitler. He had made his intentions clear in his book, Mein Kampf, Asat, Lebensraum, or Living Space, for the German people in Eastern Europe. After taking the rest of Czechoslovakia, his eyes turned to Poland. On September 1st, 1939, German forces stormed across the Polish border. This time, there would be no more appeasement. 2 days later, on September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Second World War had begun. The initial phase of the war was marked by shocking speed and brutality. Germany unleashed a new form of warfare, the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. Using a coordinated onslaught of tanks, planes, and infantry, they overwhelmed their opponents. Poland fell in weeks. Then, after a period of relative quiet known as the Phony War, the storm broke over Western Europe in the spring of 1940. Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Belgium all fell in rapid succession. The main Allied forces in France were outmaneuvered and pushed back to the coast, to a small port town called Dunkirk. What happened next was nothing short of a miracle. In a moment of incredible civilian courage, a flotilla of hundreds of fishing boats, yachts, and merchant ships sailed from Britain across the English Channel. Under constant enemy fire, they, along with the Royal Navy, evacuated over 338,000 trapped Allied soldiers from the beaches of Dunkirk. While a strategic defeat, the spirit of Dunkirk became a powerful symbol of British resolve, but the situation was grim. France surrendered in June 1940, and Britain, led by the defiant Winston Churchill, now stood alone against the might of the Nazi war machine. Hitler, expecting Britain to sue for peace, prepared to invade. But first, he had to control the skies. What followed was the Battle of Britain. For months, the Royal Air Force, though outnumbered, heroically dueled with the German Luftwaffe in the skies over England. Churchill famously paid tribute to these pilots. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Against the odds, they won. The invasion was called off, and Britain survived. Hitler, frustrated, turned his attention eastward. In a fateful decision that would ultimately seal his doom, Hitler broke his non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. On June 22, 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of Russia. He believed the Soviet regime would collapse in a matter of weeks. Initially, the German advance was staggering, reaching the very outskirts of Moscow. But they had underestimated two things: the vastness of Russia and the brutal Russian winter. The offensive ground to a halt, and the war on the Eastern Front devolved into a brutal, attritional struggle that would consume millions of lives and become the deadliest theater of the entire war. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, another power was making its move. The Empire of Japan had been waging a brutal war of expansion in China since 1937. The United States, though officially neutral, opposed Japanese aggression and had imposed a crippling oil embargo. Japan's leadership saw the U.S. Pacific Fleet as the only obstacle to their dominance in the region. On the morning of December 7, 1941, they launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack was devastating, but it failed to destroy the American aircraft carriers, which were out at sea. More importantly, it awakened a sleeping giant. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan, and a few days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the U.S. The conflict was now truly a world war. The years 1942 and 1943 marked the turning of the tide. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway saw the U.S. Navy inflict a catastrophic defeat on the Japanese fleet, sinking 4 of their vital aircraft carriers. Japan would never fully recover. In North Africa, British and American forces defeated the German and Italian armies, securing the Mediterranean. And on the Eastern Front, the gargantuan Battle of Stalingrad ended in a crushing German defeat. The Sixth Army was surrounded and forced to surrender. It was the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. With the tide turned, the Allies prepared to take the fight to mainland Europe. On June 6, 1940, Fortidatha, largest amphibious invasion in history, was launched. Over 150,000 Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy, France. Despite facing fierce German resistance and suffering heavy casualties, they established a beat. This was the opening of the long-awaited Western Front. For the next 11 months, Allied forces pushed from the west, while the Soviets advanced relentlessly from the east. It was a brutal fight through France, Belgium, and finally, into Germany itself. As Allied soldiers liberated occupied territories, they uncovered the full, sickening extent of the Nazi regime's crimes. They discovered the concentration and extermination camps, places like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Treblinka, where millions of men, women, and children, and 6 million of them Jewish, had been systematically murdered in the Holocaust. This was the darkest chapter of the war, a genocide of unimaginable scale that serves as a permanent, chilling warning to all of humanity about the depths of hatred and intolerance. By the spring of 1945, the end was near in Europe. The Soviets fought their way into Berlin in a final, bloody battle. On April 30th, with his 1,000-year empire crumbling around him, Adolf Hitler took his own life in his bunker. A week later, on May 8, 1945, Germany officially surrendered. The day was celebrated as V-Day, victory in Europe. But the war was not yet over. In the Pacific, Japan fought on with fanatical determination. The prospect of invading the Japanese mainland was daunting, with casualty estimates running into the millions. To avoid this, U.S. President Harry Truman made a momentous and controversial decision. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber dropped a new, terrifying weapon, an atomic bomb, on the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The devastation was absolute. Faced with this overwhelming power, Japan announced its surrender on August 15th. On September 2nd, 1945, the formal surrender documents were signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. World War II was finally over. The world that emerged from the ashes was forever changed. Over 70 million people had perished. Nations lay in ruins, and empires had crumbled. The war gave rise to 2 new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, whose ideological struggle would define the next half-century in the Cold War. It led to the creation of the United Nations, an organization dedicated to preventing future conflicts. The story of World War II is a stark reminder of the cost of war and the dangers of unchecked ambition and hatred. But it is also a testament to the courage and sacrifice of a generation that fought to defend freedom and defeat tyranny. We must never forget their story. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through such a pivotal moment in history. If you found this video informative, please give it a like, and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what piece of history you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious,